Today, we make Vladimir Putin regret the day he questioned America's resolve. And we make clear to others, like China's President Xi, not to test our determination.
That was Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer from New York speaking on the floor of the Senate Tuesday, following approval by the Senate of a $95 billion national security funding bill that would send another $61 billion to Ukraine and $14 billion to Israel for the wars being conducted by those two countries. Another $5 billion would go to arm Taiwan. That bill passed 70 votes in favor and 29 opposed. 8 Republican senators spent most of the night filibustering against the proposal. That comes in the context of the largest military operation in Europe since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. And it follows pronouncements by a number of Western officials that war with Russia in the next couple years is inevitable. We're going to take a look at that with analyst Mark Sleboda, based in Moscow. We spoke with him via Skype on Wednesday. Mark, what are we looking at?
Don, in the beginning of February, NATO kicked off with a major war games right on the Russian border while the conflict is going on with Ukraine. And these are not just another war games. Steadfast Defender 2024, you got to love the naming of these things, is the largest NATO war games since 1988. There are 90,000 troops, hundreds of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, hundreds of aircraft, naval contingent, cyber warfare, and it's not just a show up for 2 weeks, war game around and go home. This Steadfast Defender is going to continue for at least 4 months. 4 months. So, I would be very surprised if all of these troops go home at the end of 4 months, right? Major war games like this are, of course, perfect cover for bringing more troops up to the Russian border, certainly as a contingency, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're rehearsing for a war, so you put your men and material, to put it in those terms, in place for that war, and you turn everything on and start moving it around, right?
Yes. The chair of the NATO Military Committee, the Dutch Admiral Rob Bauer, says that NATO must prepare for war, direct war with Russia. The UK Defense Minister Grant Shapps says the United Kingdom must prepare for war with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. The Swedish government has told their people, announcing the return of conscription of a draft military to the country, that they must prepare for war with Russia. The the Netherlands chief of the army, has said the entire society must prepare for war with Russia. The Finnish defense minister has said NATO predicts the start of a new Cold War with Russia that has the potential for turning hot. The German defense minister, on one hand, says that there's no threat of Russia attacking NATO, but that Germany must prepare for war with Russia. The top German general, the Bundeswehr General Carsten Brauer, agrees. They must prepare for conflict with Russia in 5 years.
But I'm sorry. Wait a minute. I'm preparing for a war against someone that's not going to attack me.
There we go. Romania. The Romanian army chief says that conscription needs to be reinstated, and that Romania must prepare for war with Russia. In the United Kingdom, the outgoing Chief of the General Staff, Patrick Sanders, gave a speech saying that the country must, first they said they must rapidly expand the military. There have been articles out in the British press arguing lately that the United Kingdom really doesn't have an army at this point. But that they must begin conscription to prepare a citizen army to fight Russia. And he lauds the Swedes have already taken that step. It must be a whole of nation undertaking to train and equip a citizen army that could be activated in the event of a hypothetical war with Russia. Meanwhile, Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, on one hand tells us that the conflict with Russia could last for decades, but that there is no threat of Russia directly attacking NATO. So what's going on here? On one hand, you have all of this scaremongering, and it's more than scaremongering. When you're talking restoring conscription across EU states, training mass citizen armies, and talking about decades of conflict, that's more than just scaremongering. I'm sure that is an element to it. It is to create a state of political emergency to push more taxpayer funds to support Ukraine. That's a big part of it, but it seems to be more than that. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Chief, Sergei Narishkin, has suggested that this type of scaremongering is trying to intimidate Russia, i.e. to push them to the negotiating table sooner with less demands, right, to scare them. And Russia is having none of it. Russia, meanwhile, is increasingly talking that there's really no diplomatic solution or even anyone to engage with diplomatically. The Kiev regime has actually passed laws forbidding their leader and politicians from negotiating with the Russians.
Right, it's illegal. Right,
it's illegal, right? And obviously, there is no trustworthy partner in the West after throwing away the February 21st agreement, the Minsk Accords, and all the raft of treaties before that, and the peace negotiations in the first year of the war being carried on and then dunked as soon as Russia agreed to withdraw its forces from the area around Kiev. So Russia sees no trustworthy partner there. And increasingly, we've heard from Medvedev and Lavrov and others that the only way this ends is regime change. So I would suggest that neither side is bluffing, that both sides still have maximalist goals. We keep hearing from Stoltenberg and numerous Western leaders that Russia must not win in Ukraine. That would be a defeat for NATO. We learned from the former Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom that the United Kingdom has contingency plans for sending troops to Ukraine. And the conditions are, I guess, catastrophic development of the war, such as the continuation of the occupation. That doesn't seem particularly catastrophic to me, but that tells you what their threshold is, and that they won't admit to it, but that plans are underway. And we have a piece out from RIA Novosti, a leaked plan from London, a proposal for London to send a NATO expeditionary force to Ukraine in the event of an unfavorable development of events for Kiev in the Ukrainian military theater of operations.
Well, I mean, they've already pretty much admitted that that's where they are, right?
Yeah. So I would suggest this will probably, when Kiev itself comes under threat a year or two down the line in the conflict. They talk about sending troops into Ukraine up to the Dnieper River, establishing a defensive line there, freeing up Ukrainian border troops, also sending troops to the border with Belarus, establishing a no-fly zone over Kiev regime-controlled parts of Ukraine, as well as sending NATO forces into Finland and Norway to spread out Russian forces there, and possibly to conduct strikes within Russia against national infrastructure and air bases. They're talking about direct war with Russia. Meanwhile, the Russian government, Medvedev has made clear and very loudly said multiple times that the introduction of British or any other troops into Ukraine would be considered an act of war, a declaration of war on Russia, and they would be absolutely legitimate and priority targets. And I would suggest that a year or two down the line, with NATO not able to accept defeat because they've invested so much political capital in this conflict, that this is where we're heading. That however unprepared they are, they will send troops into Western Ukraine as a human tripwire force and believe that Russia will not hit them, risking war with NATO.
The context for that, in Russia, they stated the obvious. With Austin, who's the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, disabled, and the president disabled, that the decision-making about the use of nuclear weapons is in the hand of two disabled people at the moment, with all that entails.
Three, if you count Kamala Harris.
So, all right, Mark, we'll speak with you again next week. Thank you for this.
Thanks for having me.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.